Greetings, it is New Year's Eve day, and we are going to taste apples that are still hanging on the tree. I've done this video twice before. One is in two parts, and then I did it again one time, but I wanted to do it one more time because, well, the apples are different in different years, but I actually have more this year than ever before. I think I have as many as 17 apples still hanging on the tree, excluding apples in my seedling trials for the apple breeding project. The other thing I wanted to say is that I always get a lot of comments of like, oh, well, I wish I lived in your climate and I could do that. I don't know what's possible in terms of climate, you know, like in colder climates. Today it's pretty warm. It's actually a really nice day. But, you know, we do get hard freezes with like, you know, frozen hoses and ice on top of the buckets and all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's not New York or Canada or Alaska or even North Carolina, but until more people get these varieties and varieties like them and know to let them hang and actually let them hang and try it, we don't really know what's possible. I mean, someone out there may, and if you do, please comment. But I would really like to see more people, especially in climates that are just a little bit colder, like say, you know, North Carolina, Tennessee, Appalachian Mountains come to mind for some reason. But yeah, just start pushing the limits. Now, I have heard from people in colder climates, much colder climates, even New York, Canada, that talk about hanging apples on the tree. Okay, so there may be a lot of possibility, and maybe certain of these genetics are going to be more durable. Think about that if you, you know, if this interests you, because the value of being able to walk out here in the winter and eat fresh fruit off the tree that doesn't have any taint from storage, like refrigerator storage or root cellar storage, where you just get that little bit of old flavor or off flavor, you know, even if it's sealed in plastic, that still happens. Yeah, it's just phenomenal. It's so great. Looking forward to the future. I'm determined to continue breeding with these. I have a lot of crosses made this year with POMO SANEL, which is one of the ones we're going to take a look at, even though it's not ready yet. And I just think that we're going to be able to have apples fresh off the tree, at least in some climates, into the spring. So I would call these winter hanging apples, and I think we're going to end up with eventually with high quality dessert spring hanging apples that we can eat until, you know, March at least. All right, let's roll. Number one is this apple right here. Now this is labeled as KATHERINE. And I don't know that it is KATHERINE because I got another set of scions labeled KATHERINE, and that is a totally different apple. So I don't know what this is. Let's grab one here. So this is what this apple looks like. If anyone recognizes it, it probably ripens off the tree if you pick it earlier, but I haven't really done that experiment that I can remember. But on the tree, it's just peaking right now. You'll see that this is cracked, and a lot of this variety has cracked. And there's like three different things we're dealing with here. One is whether the apple will hang on the tree without just falling off. The other one is that it actually ripens late, and it's not just a mushy, you know, mess. Like I had an apple that ripened in August, but then it hung like into the winter. And it looked perfect, but it's complete mush. Like you could just grab one and squeeze it and smush it up. And then the other thing is it durable? Okay, because say this apple, like it ripens at this season, the flesh is like great, the texture is great, but it'll crack. And the more it freezes and gets just really harsh weather, the more there's a difference between how dry it is in the summer and how, you know, how much it's kind of shrunken from that. And then when suddenly it gets hit with all this rain in the winter and puffs up, like some apples will crack really bad and some won't. Some it's like 100% loss. So then that apple is no longer a candidate for late hanging unless you're going to cross it with something and try to breed that tendency out. So this one is pretty bad about cracking. You know, it's definitely an issue, and you can kind of just eat the cracked ones first. So I'd say this one, maybe like 50% or more of the apples on the tree right now are cracked. Okay, I don't know if we've really tasted this one before. It seems like when we did this video before, they weren't ready. This is a nice crispy apple. It's extremely juicy. It's very sweet. The flavors are mild but very pleasant, and there is a certain richness to it actually. I don't know what I would call it. I really can't place any of the flavors, but they're very nice, and it actually does have kind of a richness to it. There actually may be a little something like pine, which is interesting because I have another seedling apple that has a flavor with like pine or spruce or fir or something like that. And it may be that I've tasted that in here before and just was never able to identify it because it took me a while to identify it in that other apple. Anyway, excellent late hanging apple. I think really high potential for breeding with this apple. Again, probably the only major problem is the cracking. It's very productive. It's extremely vigorous, whatever it is. I kind of doubt that this is the Catherine that Albert Etter raised and named after his wife, Catherine. Maybe it's a different Catherine. You know, maybe it's another apple, because I think there are more than one Catherine apple. Or maybe it was just mislabeled, which just happens all the time. Highly recommended. I won't have scions of this because it's grafted to Frankentree here, which has apple mosaic virus. If you're a breeder and you're really, really interested in it, I will probably be collecting pollen. I'd be willing to send out scions, you know, if you're aware that it has virus and you just still want it for breeding or something like that. I kind of want to eat this, but I'm not going to because we have lots more apples to taste. You know, look how productive it is. And lots of them have fallen off. This thing was just loaded. Okay, here we have Brushy Mountain Limbertwig. I have heard a lot of good things about this apple. There's just a little bit of cracking here. That does matter. It doesn't seem to be causing the apple any problems. It almost looks like it's not even ripe yet. Limbertwigs are a whole group of apples. I don't know how closely they're related genetically, but they have, like, you know, drooping branches, I guess. They're not common out here. They're more of like a southern thing, I think. It's very sweet, pretty strongly flavored. The texture is kind of coarse, not crunchy, not crisp. Actually, it's crunchy. It's rich and flavorful, but it's kind of peculiar. I'm not sure I'm crazy about it. I'm curious. I'm interested to see how these develop in the future and maybe try them a little bit earlier in the season. It's in good shape. There is definitely some interesting flavors, but there's something unharmonious and odd about the flavor too. It reminds me a little bit of HAUER PIPPIN, which we're also going to taste. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of that apple flavor-wise. Okay, this is POMO SANEL. As you can see, a lot of these are pollinated. Look, this whole string right here is all pollinated with Appaloosa, which is one of my red-fleshed seedlings. It's the seedling of Grenadine and Lady Williams. Now, the reason I use that on POMO SANEL here is in breeding is because Lady Williams is my latest apple, so that genetic is in here, right? In Appaloosa, it's half of Appaloosa, and Grenadine is also quite late, and a lot of the Grenadine seedlings will hang on the tree pretty long, regardless of what they're crossed with. In fact, we're going to see some Grenadines that are still hanging, although the quality may not be that good. So I basically have two late hanging apples that are crossed together, crossed with another late hanging apple here in POMO SANEL. You can see this is very green still. It has kind of a lean green look. That's because it is not ready. I'm going to look for one. This one looks a little more yellow. That's cross-pollinated with something. I made a lot of cross-pollinations. This is all Lady Williams. More Appaloosa, more Appaloosa. That's exciting. So I'll have some of these seeds available, by the way. Gold Rush. I'm also going to have some Gold Rush seeds that are cross-pollinated that I just, you know, hadn't had them harvested when I listed my apple seeds before. So probably when I list scions in like February 1st to February 15th is probably when I'll put my scions out for sale. I'll have a new batch of seeds from the POMO SANEL and Gold Rush. And maybe a few other things. All right, let's taste this, but I don't think it's going to be ready yet. That's pretty ripe. It's actually really sweet. There's quite a bit of banana flavor, which I'm not crazy about. I think the flavor will probably get a little bit more complex as these ripen longer. They're very durable, as you can see. There's really very little cracking or anything on them. Even the scab areas haven't cracked that bad. Well, if you like bananas or banana candy, this is much more banana-y than I can even remember in any year, although it often has that. You probably like this apple. It really tastes like artificial banana candy. If you wanted to encourage that trait, you could cross it with another one we're going to taste next, which is My Jewel. Now, this is My Jewel, and it feels like it's still good. A lot of yellow apples taste like banana, but this by far has been the most banana-y one I've ever tasted. Whoa. Whoa, that's like literally knocking me backwards. I mean, obviously not, but yeah, I have this like backing up thing. I'm like, whoa, get that flavor's in my face. Wow. That is really, really flavorful. The texture is still great. As you can see, it gets scabbed really bad. It's, you know, it's all warty looking and stuff, but it survived all that, even with the cracks, and there's cracks here. Still didn't rot. I mean, I think this has a lot of potential in breeding late hanging apples too. It almost tastes like the whole apple was saturated with like an artificial banana flavoring. Crazy. I'm gonna have to feed this to a couple people and watch their reactions. All right, here's yet another apple that will tend to have kind of a banana-ish flavor. This is White Winter Pearmain. At least that's what it's labeled as. Makes sense. The shape is right. That's a pearmain shape. They're kind of like an upside down pear. See? Well, that's hanging well, but it's past its prime. I could see making, you know, cooking with it, maybe making sauce. You know, 3 weeks ago, it was kind of peaking. All right, let's go up here in the tree. There's some other stuff hanging on here that we're probably not going to taste, like that yellow one right over there, the big ones, Calvin Blanc de Verre, very famous French cooking apple. It's a much earlier apple though, so it's not going to be good right now. Okay, this is Becca's crab. I mentioned this on Instagram, I think, or maybe in a video, how I'm breeding with this thing a lot. And I made a bunch of crosses with Wixon and other crabs this year and other apples. So I'll be planting a bunch of seed. I sent a bunch of seed out to other people. It hangs really well. As you can see, a lot of them have bledded. It's kind of where they turn all soft and mushy. And while we're up here, let's pick a Lady Williams. This thing really hangs tight to the tree. And normally this isn't ripe for another month. All right, let's do Lady Williams here. Again, this is usually ripe a month later, but it has a pretty long eating window. It'll be a little sharp and a little starchy until it really hits its final ripeness. That's actually fairly ripe, not quite there, but it's not as crunchy as it usually is. A little bit softer this year, I don't know why. It's kind of a weird year. Has quite a bit of flavor, like pretty complex fruity flavor. I think this will still improve, although I'm kind of worried that the texture isn't great. I've used this a lot in breeding for obvious reasons because of the super late hanging. Extremely durable on the tree. This is one of the ones that really withstands all kinds of weather, hard freezes, rain, swelling, you know, with the fall rains and stuff. But most of the crosses I've made, at least with Grenadine, turned out to be fairly primitive throwbacks and not very good. However, this is a parent of one of the most popular modern apples right now, which is Pink Lady. So that another option is breeding with Pink Lady instead of this. This is WHITWICK PIPPIN, pollinated with that POMO SANEL. Let's try that. This is a real promising apple. Very sugary. The flavor doesn't seem quite as complex as usual. It's quite rich though, and very nice. Extremely white flesh. Very nice. Yeah, this has a lot of potential for growing for a late apple, and definitely for breeding. I want this in the mix, so I'm going to save the seeds from this. But there's other stuff I'd rather cross with it. The crosses I made just didn't take this year for some reason. But maybe I'll have pollen of this available too. I did have a little bit last year. Okay, remind me to grab that later and save the seeds. All right, Becca's crab. I had an opportunity to feed this to quite a few people this year, and generally people liked it. Yeah, it was pretty favorable. I eat them whole, just like a cherry. That one's gone mealy. See, the flesh is really yellow. This one's better. But into December, when I was posting about this on Instagram, it was super crunchy, like really, really crisp and crunchy in December. This is past its season for sure. It's a little bit crabby. It has a fairly high tannin, so there's like a little bit of pucker, but it's very high in sugar. I believe it was 22%. I'll try to look that up and put it on the screen. And the flavor, it has a lot of flavor. And if you chew up the seeds with it, it has almost like a cherry quality because the cyanic acid in the seeds is almond flavored, and that kind of adds to that kind of almondy cherry flavor. And the texture is great. So, I really think there's a lot of potential in breeding with this. My friend Chris Hamanek said that he thinks it's Malus prunifolia, and I looked up pictures of that, and it looks like it. So that's as far as I've gone with trying to identify it. But like I said, I made a lot of crosses with it this year. All kinds of great stuff like Wixon, chestnut crab, Appaloosa, pink parfait and stuff. So I'm going to be growing a bunch of those out. Because as good as it is, and it's fun to eat, and the yellow flesh is neat, I think there's a lot of potential to grow an apple like that. You probably saw there's just these like clusters, right? It's like clusters of cherries that you just eat whole off the stem, seeds and all. And talk about, you know, that thing is a powerhouse of antioxidant and phytonutrients. Like all those tannins in the skin, all that pigment in the flesh and in the skin, that yellow pigment, the cyanic acid in the seeds is like anti-cancer. I just think there's a huge potential there to breed apples, one bite apples that are like the size of a small to large cherry that you just eat off the stem, seeds and all. Okay, here's a couple of late grenadines. Very firm still, actually. Almost hard. The flesh is like super mealy. It's like a dry powder. Oh, look at that color. Yeah, high color, and the flavor is phenomenal. You know, for processing, cutting up to put in apple cake, which is really cool because it holds the color. But yeah, not too useful. That's why I breed with this, and I'm not excited about the idea of just growing tons of them. I'm more interested in using this and improving it. This is a little late. Usually it's not quite this late. Like I said, it's kind of a weird year, but it seems like every year is weird now with global weirding. So, okay, let's head to the garden orchard. So here's a new one that I haven't tried before. I mean, I had some earlier this season, but you know, I've never tried to hang it late. It feels very, very firm. It's called Ingram. Is that right? I think it's Ingram. Yeah, it's Ingram. You can see it's very dark red. It's almost as dark red as like, you know, King David, Oxford Black, Black Strawberry. And I think one of them had red flesh when I ate it, I'm pretty sure. But since then, I haven't been able to find another one that had any color trace of red flesh at all. But one of them seemed to have like red veining in there. It's still extremely firm. I wouldn't call it crispy. It doesn't have that kind of crispy, crunchy thing when you're actually eating it, but it cleaves off in big, hard chunks. The flavor, extremely sweet, low acid. If you imagine like a red apple candy, it's kind of like that. A little bit reminiscent of King David, but nowhere near the complexity or intensity and richness of flavor. However, wow, beautiful, no cracking, nice dark red skin, super late hanging. I'm going to leave a couple of those on and see how they do, but at this point it looks like they may hold up even longer. So promising. Ingram. Here we have this funny flat apple called Allen's Everlasting. Typically this is done by this time of year, but again, a weird year. Things seem to be late. I expected them to be early because we had a lot of really warm fall and early winter weather, but for whatever reason, things seem to ripen late. As in other videos when I've done this and tasted all these apples, this one's a little bit earlier, so like it probably peaked about 2 weeks ago. Very rich flavor, very nice apple. I've fed this to other people this year with very favorable comments, and yeah, it's really nice. I think it deserves a place in breeding late hanging apples. It's just a good apple overall. It's worth trying to grow. It grows well as a cordon. It's very productive. You'll get these like short stems with tons of spurs in close and really high production. So yeah, the Allen's Everlasting, nice apple, old Irish variety. Okay, this is what I have labeled as Keener Seedling. It's a really interesting apple. It's really pretty in an antique-y kind of way with all this silver russet and then just multiple layers of color. There's like some pink here and it fades into this like gold and more pink and all this russet and green, and really interesting looking apple. I've never tried to actually look this up and identify it in terms of like the color characteristics, shape, you know, and all that stuff. So I don't know if this actually is Keener Seedling, but I'm trying to collect a few more samples of it. Look at that. It's just like, it's like this silvery, what a neat apple. Flavors are like ripe pear, which is pretty typical of russets. That happens a lot. Let's get another one. That's soft. Maybe this one. It looks more unripe. So this one is still actually hard, but it's not crispy or crunchy. I wouldn't call it juicy. Most russets aren't juicy. Flavor, it's okay. This is still actually underripe. Again, more like a rounded kind of rich sweet pear type of flavor. Overall, I'm not like excited about this right now. Hopefully it'll improve, or I'll get some other things labeled keener seedling and they'll be better. I don't dislike it. Potential, maybe for growing, maybe for breeding. Not sure though. I'm certainly not excited about it. This is Muscat divinus, related to Wixon, an Albert Eder apple. I don't usually expect this to hang this late. Again, kind of a weird year. As always with this apple, it's extreme sweetness with no acid. I mean, sure there's acid in it, but you can't really taste it. It doesn't taste like it's acidic at all. More akin to eating like a sugar cube or sugar cane or drinking syrup. So it's a little bit cloying. There's also this weird flavor that the closest thing I can nail it to is like crab or lobster. It's like a sweet umami, kind of a seafood savory type of flavor, just drenched in sugar. It's like insanely sweet. And you can see it has this kind of translucent look. I think that's basically sugar. Now, if you tested this, I'm not sure it would test super high for sugar. If I remember right, when I tested it before, it didn't. But it's more like it just is so low in acid that it just tastes super, super sweet. Not that it isn't super sweet. I'm sure it's very high in sugar. It's well over 20%, probably 25 or more. Okay, one of my favorite winter apples here is pink parfait. This one looks good. There's a little rot there. These things get scabbed real bad. You can see, look at that. I mean, they're just awful. Birds like them too, so that's a problem. This apple could just be a real popular and amazing if it didn't get scabbed so bad. That's kind of its worst problem. Late in the season like this, it gets this really rich honey-like flavor. This year I wouldn't say it's a dead ringer for honey, but in some years it is. It's really just that floral honey taste. Really juicy, usually a little more crisp than it is this year. Let's try a different one. Mild berries, honey, sweet, acid balance, pretty good tang to it. Very crunchy, very, very juicy, like just mouthfuls of juice. Great apple. Big fan of this apple. All right, we're clipping right along here. I'm trying to keep it moving here. This is a real durable apple. It really holds up without any cracking. It takes, repeated freezing and all kinds of weather really well. But I'm just not that impressed with the flavor or the texture in the past, and which is why I grafted over most of this tree to something else. Given its extreme durability, it's very handsome. It's not bad eating quality. There's just something about it that I just don't like. The texture's not amazing. The flavor is weird in a way that I just cannot nail down and describe. I don't really want to grow this apple, but again, it may have a place in breeding late hanging apples. And here we have mere pippin. As you can see, this tree is kind of like real small and upright. Like the branches will grow out and then grow up mostly without a lot of side branching. So it's kind of a compact, small tree. Definitely not quite a columnar tree. Well, it's still hanging, but a lot of them have fallen off. I have a feeling if I shook that tree, like half of these would fall off, and there's only about 7 left. It's kind of gone soft. The flavor is there. There's a lot of it, quite a bit, but it's not very good. It tastes a little bit peculiar. This was fairly productive this year. I could see using that as a late processing apple. Things like cider jelly, cider syrup, apple butter. Okay, now we're off to the seedling rows. Let's go. As you can see, there's a fair bit of stuff still hanging on here. Let's try this. This was kind of something that seemed like it could be a late cooking apple. That one's still in good condition. It's a thinly flavored, acidic, but certainly could be good for cooking. Okay, this is grenadine crossed with unknown other parent 11, number 7. I'd almost bet that this is a cross with Lady Williams. It's got an acidity to it, has actually similar flavor. Yeah, this could be a good late cooking apple. I would say it would have been better 2 to even 4 weeks ago. when I was tasting it as a cooking apple. It's kind of, even though it's held well, like hung well, it's just not really at its best. But it's very reminiscent of Lady Williams. I'd almost bet this is one. It also has just a tinge of red flesh right here along the skin. Not enough to really matter, but you know, given the productivity and the overall health of this and everything, maybe for breeding, I don't know. I'm just going to grab a couple of these and bite into them, and if I find anything interesting, I'll tell you about it. This could end up being a good late processing or cider apple. It's very sugary. It's got a good measure of tannin. It's held up really well in the tree. I don't see a lot of scab on there. Now that could be because I already picked a bunch off, but it really doesn't look scabby. It's definitely not like a good eating apple, but it could be a late processing or cider apple. I was thinking about calling this one, but I think I'm going to hang on to it. And what's this? This looks interesting, doesn't it? There's a little red fleshed apple there. This is Grenadine Lady Williams 1113. What is up with this one? It's kind of hard and woody, not great eating. Nice flavors. There's some nice kind of berry-like flavors in there. Very sweet, but also some peculiar flavors and fairly high tannin. If it was like scab-free or really low scab, it might be considered as a late cider apple. I'll give that one a stay of execution for now. Okay, these are kind of messed up, but this is an interesting one. But you look at this cracking, and that actually might be, no, that's cracking from the rain. See that? So it has a serious problem with that. Otherwise, this was looking pretty interesting last time I tasted it. Interesting. Past its prime, but still pretty good. Try a different one. This one doesn't look in much better shape. Look at all that. Yeah, this is a serious problem. If a late hanging apple is going to do that, it's kind of a deal breaker, even if it's a really good apple, even if it hangs, even if it tastes good. This apple is really inconsistent. Inconsistent size and shape, inconsistent flavor, inconsistent ripening. So we'll see how this, the first year it's ever produced anything, actually second year, but the first year it only produced one apple. And then a couple of stunted apples, yeah, again, really inconsistent. But I am going to keep an eye on this one because it is a pretty interesting flavor. All right, so finally, this is the last one. Okay, this is the last one of the day. And I'm very excited about this apple. I'm really glad this last one hung on. This is the apple that was tasting like pine or spruce or something. One of the crunchiest apples I've ever eaten earlier in the season. We'll see how it is now. And judging from the fact that this last one hung on for so long, I think this would hang very, very late. Let's just see if it's holding its quality though. That would be cool to have an apple at Christmas that tastes like pine trees. Wow. Super crunch. You hear it? Oh yeah. Damn. Tastes like Christmas. It's so weird. Super exciting. Okay, so again, this apple doesn't have like a rich body to it, like a base flavor that's rounded and filled out. It has these high aromatic flavors that kind of float around and are a little bit transient, in their nature. They kind of like come up as this high aromatic and then fade away. But between the flavor, the sugar acid balance, the intense crunch, just like super almost icy crunch. It's maybe a little less crunchy than it was earlier in the season, but it's quite crunchy. I'm also getting a hint of banana in this one, which I did get in another one earlier, but only one. And I have a feeling that the flavor of this is going to vary, apple to apple, year to year. But yeah, I'm excited about this little late hanging gem here. There's got to be a clever name for that apple. Something about a Christmas ornament or Christmas tree or Christmas apple. Something about ice, because I would never name, at this point, I would never name an apple Crisp anything unless it was some kind of joke like Ludacrisp, which is already an apple name, which is hilarious. I just saw that on Adam's Apples blog. But I would name maybe Ice, something Ice, because of just that kind of crunch. It's almost like biting into an ice, like a snowball, ice ball. That's a lot of material to work with. I would say, I wasn't keeping track, but over half of those have real potential for breeding more of these, right? Just keep crossing those things together, choosing the latest ones and crossing those together, etc. My goal with this class of apples is just to get a bunch of crosses out there, like make the logical crosses and the inspired crosses in terms of like the flavor, the season, other qualities, scab resistance, things like that, and just get a bunch of seedlings out there growing. That'll get like a first generation to work with, and it'll also possibly reveal which crosses have really high potential, like which crosses produce more even later apples or just really high quality apples. For instance, when I crossed, again, Grenadine and Lady Williams, the offspring really has not been that good. But other crosses are going to reveal, I think better offspring, and just in terms of the percentage of high quality eating apples that they produce. Okay, I'm going to finish this up, last one of the season. Hopefully I'll have more of these next year. Everybody have a great year. Thank you all for buying my apple seeds. That was a big help this year. There's more coming. Again, I'll have Gold Rush crosses and POMO SANEL crosses with the scions. And if you want scions, the way that works is I list them in late winter, usually I think February 1st or February 15th or something like that. I announce them on social media all at the same time. But my patrons on Patreon get first pick of anything that's limited like that, seed scions. So they'll get a couple days access before they go to the general public. But on that day, I'll post like to YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook all at the same time that they're ready. And then you can just go on the website store and just order them in the shopping cart. I do not send scions overseas, but or to other countries, but I'll send apple seeds to other countries. Okay, have a great year, and I hope it's fruitful and productive and helps you reach your goals, whatever they are. This is a big pit I had dug that's going to be an experiment, like a bunch of orchard experiments in one row, maybe like 6 or 7 different things I'm doing in here. So yeah, cool project.